Nvidia reported Q2 earnings Wednesday, beating on the top and bottom lines, but after several quarters of blockbuster blowout results, the numbers still weren't good enough for many investors. So the big question is, the AI trade already cooling off? Well, joining us now to talk about it is Bradley Tusk, Tusk Venture Partners founder and CEO. Bradley, great to see you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So I'll start right there. Nvidia, sure. I mean, it was a solid report, solid guide, right? Yeah. Obviously, investors wanted more. I'm just curious how you thought about it, Bradley, and just what you thought it made of the broader AI trend.
Right. I mean, the funny thing is, it exceeded expectations. Right. It exceeded, a couple of days ago when we were looking at, like, okay, where does Nvidia need to get to make investors happy? Mm-hmm. It hit that and then did better. And so really, it sort of, I think, speaks to a slightly broader concern, which is at the back of investors' minds are starting to wonder, like, hey, are we overinflating this? Is it going too far? Because they couldn't have really done any better than they did. It's unreasonable. Like, it's your fault. It's not their fault. It's a question of, are they overvalued? And that's collectively our fault, right? They're going to take as much as they could possibly get. That's human nature. So the question really becomes, and one that I, as an early stage tech investor, keep asking is, okay, we understand that this is transformative technology. Are the revenue streams there? So for example, we saw this morning an announcement that OpenAI is raising again and at over $100 billion valuation. I'm not entirely sure what the revenue model is, right? Maybe they're just selling information off of the LLMs to other AI providers. Maybe they'll turn into a version of search like Google and have ads. But it's a lot of this sort of like, oh, it's gonna be incredible, it's gonna change everything. But at some point, there's gotta be revenue. So like, I have found that I've said no to the vast majority of early stage AI deals that have come my way, because it keeps being like, okay, we want $100 or $150 million valuation for a Series A company with $1 million in revenue, or $2 million in revenue. And like, that's crazy, right? And like, I understand that like, it sounds cool to be investing in AI, but ultimately like, my job is to return capital to my LPs. And if I'm investing at wildly inflated values, I can't do that. And so I wonder if the same hesitancy that I'm feeling a little bit on the early stage venture side is a little bit of what we're seeing in the market today with Nvidia.
Well, let's go to that OpenAI valuation. The company, and reports that the company is closing in on a new funding round that could value the company at $100 billion, as you mentioned. Some of those investors, Apple, Microsoft, now we're hearing reports that Nvidia could be involved. If you were to get a call from the CEOs of those three companies right now, what would you tell them?
I mean, look, I think the question is, what's the strategic value for you in having a role with OpenAI? What they all might say is, look, we want a seat at the table. We want to know what they're up to. We don't want all of a sudden Microsoft taking this thing, going off in a totally different direction that we can't compete with. So therefore, it is worth it to us, regardless of whether or not the $100 billion valuation becomes worth 50 or 150 or whatever it is. If that's the point, yes. But if they're like, no, this is purely a play because we think this is a great investment and we think it's going to $1 trillion, my question to them would be like, okay, based on what? Like, yeah, Sam Altman's a wildly impressive person. ChatGPT is certainly a cool, impressive piece of software. But right now, like, they don't make any money. I mean, there's a little bit of a pro feature that people could buy. So I'd want to know.
Is it a hedge, though? Sorry to interrupt. If
but that would be the strategic argument, right?
They don't want ChatGPT to take their lunch.
Yeah, that would be you're buying in to get intel and potential partnerships and influence and things like that, and you don't really care what happens to the investment itself. And look, we see in my business all the time, strategics invest at valuations that, if you were a venture capitalist, you wouldn't do because they don't make sense, but in terms of the bigger picture for them, might be just fine.
Well, I'm curious, as a venture investor, you meet with these founders, Bradley, and they're talking to you about this wild, amazing, and AI-enabled product or service. How do you actually try to distinguish between what's real versus marketing fluff? I heard a smart venture investor once say, he said this, he actually said it's simple. He said, how in real estate, it's location, location, location. For me, it's just founder, founder, founder. That's what I look for. Is it that simple?
Yes and no. So look, as an early stage investor, you're always betting on the founder more than anything else, right? We're investing in companies that will have somewhere between $500,000 and a couple of $1 million in revenue. So, it's not like all of a sudden you're asking Apple, like, what are the underlying mechanisms that you're looking to evaluate OpenAI, right? So yes, it's founder, but also I think to me, it's differentiation. So like, I get pitched, for example, because our focus is sort of regulatory, like all these AI companies that are going to show everyone how to comply with AI, right? There's 100 of these startups out there. And the problem is I can't figure out how any one of them is different from the other 99. And so like in theory, it's interesting. But for me, when I'm looking at saying, okay, is there a regulatory angle here that will give my portfolio companies a real advantage?
What is the competitive advantage?
Arbitrage?
Right.
And if the answer is they're kind of like everyone else, then it's really hard to see. So yeah, it's founder, but there also has to be this is how we're going to make money. This is why people are going to part with their hard-earned money to purchase our product, our services, and this is how we're different than everyone else. And if you can show me those two things, it's very likely that I'd be interested in investing. But just by flashing the words AI a lot, like that doesn't mean anything.
Story plus math.
Yeah,
Potential
exactly. Or that basically that's what early stage VC is, right? A little bit of pixie dust, a little bit of math.
There you go. There you go. Some fundamentals. All right. I want to switch gears to the election and
sure.
last couple of minutes with you. In your conversations that you're having with other folks in the VC community, how much enthusiasm are you seeing that aligns with yours for the Harris campaign?
I mean, exponentially more than we saw with Biden, right? There was.
How come, Bradley?
I mean, there was zero because I think that when you asked voters writ large, when it was Trump and Biden, are you happy with the choices? It was just overwhelming, like 80% no. It was very hard to get excited about an 81-year-old guy who, especially in the world of tech, didn't know anything, right? Like he couldn't tell you what AI stood for or anything else like that. Look, I don't know if Harris is going to be incredible on tech or not, but at least she's not 81. She comes from California, Northern California, has familiarity with Silicon Valley, will be better suited to understand issues that we care about. And some of her appointments will have to be better. So for example, when you had Pomp on a few minutes ago, you guys were talking about sort of what he thinks will happen in terms of regulation. Whether it's Trump or Harris, odds are Gary Gensler will not be the SEC chair again next time. For crypto, that's great, because you literally couldn't be worse than Gary Gensler. Lena Khan, who I do think has done some good things when it comes to sort of big tech antitrust prosecution, has also been a real deterrent around regular M&A, which has hurt venture liquidity. Odds are she's not getting another 4 years as FTC chair, even if Harris gets reelected. That's meaningful. So a lot of this with this election is less about what are their policies and what do they have in their party platforms, because that stuff goes in the trash the minute the election's over. And it's really, who are they going to appoint? Who's going to be their Treasury Secretary? Who's going to be their Justice, their Attorney General? And that's really where the rubber meets the road on this stuff.
Bradley, when you're talking to, let's say, Wall Street donors, are they equally enthusiastic about Harris?
I think that they are a lot more enthusiastic about Harris than they were about Biden. And so then it gets back to the question of, look, when you were asking the question of purely what's best for my pocketbook, you can make an argument either way, right? You could say, oh, I think Trump will be better on crypto, or Harris will be better on AI, or whatever it is, and you're sort of guessing here or there. And then there's the secondary question of like, what kind of world do I want to live in? Look, I have been very publicly for Harris, and it's simply because I don't know which president I'll make more money or less money under, but I know that it was just really stressful for me when Trump was president. It was just chaos all the time. I don't like living in that. By the way, as newscasters, you guys might love it, right? It might be much better for your business model than someone who's kind of quiet and boring. But for me, at least, like it's just, I don't want to live with that level of uncertainty and stress, and I don't think that's good for the economy either.
Last question. Obviously, Harris and Walz tonight, first big interview. What's a win for them? What do they need to accomplish?
Make no news. Look, whether or not, and really I should be asking you guys this question, which is, she's been on a 5-week honeymoon now, however long since Biden dropped out of the race, and we've got about, 10 or so to go till the election. If the mainstream media is going to sort of keep this all the way through the next 10 weeks, she's in decent shape. It's still a 50-50 election, but she's in decent shape. If at some point the media says, okay, our job is to start asking really hard questions of someone who wants to put themselves in front of the voters to be president, the math might change a little bit. So I'm curious to see how Dana does tonight.
If she says to CNN, she starts talking about her tax policies, I want higher taxes on people, companies, unrealized gains, how do investors react to that?
Badly. Now look, she's a smart lady, right? And I think what we saw in her speech the other night at the convention is, she knows what she's doing. She is not going to probably make unforced errors. Her team is pretty smart. So I don't expect her to say things that will wildly just upset the market and upset Wall Street. But yeah, as a Democrat, she is certainly balancing multiple constituencies, right? So she's got the center where she tends to reside a little more. But, she needs the left also. They've got to come out and vote, just like Trump needs some version of the center and he needs the far right. And on things like abortion, he's balancing those two issues. She's balancing those two issues on things like taxes and the economy. And so she's going to walk a fine line, and we'll see how well she can walk it tonight. But I don't think that CNN is going to rake her over the coals too much. If you could somehow bet on the likelihood of this being a positive interview for her, I'd bet that it probably comes out just fine.
But it sounds like you think her tax policy is going to get rolled back if she makes it into
I think ultimately, we don't know who's going to quite take the center of the House, but it's going to be close. The fact that we're 10 weeks out and we really have no idea means we're not talking big margins in either direction, which means getting anything through Congress, whether you're Trump or Harris, is going to be virtually impossible. So I wouldn't take anything they're telling you they're going to do that requires an act of Congress at face value, because the likelihood of them passing it on either end is really low.
Bradley, great to have you on the show.
Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
Fantastic to have you. And by the way, Bradley's new book, Vote with Your Phone, Why Mobile Voting is Our Final Shot at Saving Democracy. That is available September 17th.